I came out of Barbie with mixed feelings. I thought about it, then I thought about it again, and again and again. I thought about it more than any movie I've seen this year. I thought about it so much it scared me.
I've thought about her every day.
I was so conflicted in what I was going to say about the film that this is my third recording of this review. I ended up seeing the movie for a second time before making this video. I just felt that there was something I was missing about the movie. This is a film unlike anything I've ever seen before. The only comparison I can really make is to Todd Phillips' Joker in sneaking in an art film in the form of a mainstream movie. But what Barbie tries to do is perhaps far more out there than even that. But does it succeed? Certainly everyone seems to have a different opinion on it. In fact, I've never seen such a rainbow of different opinions over a film. But I'm gonna lay it all out for you. This is the only review of Barbie that you need to watch. If you loved the Barbie film, this video is for you. If you hated the Barbie film, this video is also for you. Barbie begins in the fun, imaginary world of Barbie Land. Everything is bright, pink, and simple. Keyword being simple. Every Barbie has their own house, an amazing job, and is happy. Of course, it's a different story if you're a Ken who is seen as nothing more than an accessory to Barbie to be used as a dance partner or eye candy or disregarded if she chooses. We get to be treated to some of the best set and costume design that I have ever seen in a movie. We see scenes that portray how it is to be a little girl playing with toys so accurately it's incredible. From the open-up car hospital where a character can be lifted from an injury and immediately cured, to the amazing dance number. Everything is great until one of the Barbies starts to see changes to herself that make her less perfect and starts to become depressed. Barbie desperately wants to remain the same happy, carefree girl she was. This prompts her to set out on a journey to the real world to find out what's wrong with her. As you can already see, Barbie is a movie that is going to have a lot to say about what it is to be a woman and gender dynamics. And you know right away because everything in this movie is blatantly spelled out. Most every character in this movie talks in the most on-the-nose, obvious dialogue. How do we know the Barbies are meant to represent a woman accomplished in every way? Well, they'll just directly spell it out. How do we know that there's sexism in the real world? Well, it's because the men are portrayed as leering, lustful stereotypes. How do we know that some people have a problem with Barbie's perfect body type and personality? Well, a teen girl literally spews out that against her, where she calls Barbie a fascist. Once again, it's all in the most exaggerated, cartoonish, on-the-nose dialogue, where you know no one talks like that in real life. But wait a minute. That's the point. The reason why the movie intentionally makes every character an extreme of a certain type of idea is that it's trying to critique these ideas, to bring certain things to the extreme to show how ridiculous it is. The Supreme Court Barbie who spells out that she is spontaneously perfect at balancing logic and emotion at the same time is meant to be a mockery of the ideas of modern feminism, where the response to a time when women were encouraged to only be mothers was to say that a woman's peak is to just have an amazing career. But as the movie points out later through its mother figure Gloria, what's wrong if a woman just wants to be an ordinary mother? What you are going to find in this film is that it works on multiple levels. Like the girl Sasha I mentioned, who flips out at Barbie to tell her how she doesn't help women at all. It's meant to voice the people who have that criticism, but it's also meant to mock it. To see someone place so much blame on a toy for Earth's problems, and even to go so far as call it a fascist, it also shows how heartbreaking it would be for a toy character as innocent and friendly as Barbie to find out that some people hate her so much. This is what we see throughout the film, giving blatant stereotypes to represent broad ideas. We even see that in Gloria's relationship with her daughter, blatantly representing the mom who wants to cling to her Ed jeweler's daughter who is having none of it. Sasha represents the jaded person of today that sees everything as problematic. Gloria represents the more positive outlook on Barbie from the past, though she has her own melancholy nature about her. The Mattel CEO represents a male feminist who claims to love little girls but is actually more concerned with the company's bottom dollar. Does this approach always work? No. Some of the character development is really lost in this approach. Like the mother-daughter conflict I mentioned seems to just magically get resolved without us actually seeing how it developed. Meanwhile, there are definitely moments where all of the platitudes and dialogue gets way too heavy-handed. The script needed to pull it back just a bit, just so it felt that the filmmakers weren't venting. But there's a great moment smack dab in the middle of all of this that does pull it back. It halts the fast pace and the stereotypes and the cartoonish jokes for a minute, where we get to see Barbie experiencing life for the first time. She sees children playing, a couple fighting, a man crying, two men laughing. She's experiencing life for the first time in all of its complexity. She sees a woman on the bench next to her, and it's the first time she's ever seen an old person. She tells her she's beautiful, which the lady replies, "I know it," which is the most important scene in the film. But we will come back to that later. But as I was saying, this scene shows the power in the film, showing and not telling everything. The movie doesn't always succeed at nuance. It pretty much shows all men in a negative light and doesn't show any kind of counter to that, but it also pokes fun at those stereotypes we have about men. What is it to be a man? Beer, trucks. Ken assumes that men are in charge of the real world, but he quickly finds out that that's wrong and that men just can't get everything that they want. But as the movie shows Ken's plight, rather than just tell it, it actually makes me feel more for him than ironically any other character. But part of that is also just because he's treated so horribly. So as I've told you, Ken's life in Barbie Land is pretty miserable. They are supposedly supposed to represent how women had it in the 1950s. They're seen as Barbie as superfluous. Ken has no job, no house to go to. He gets excited in the real world that someone has respect for him to say "excuse me," and that someone else noticed him enough to ask him the time. Holy crap. Does Ken represent a woman in the 1950s or a slave in the 1600s?
Sarah, this has never happened, and if I move it sinks lower. Oh, Sarah, help me.
I felt bad for Ken. I wanted to give him a hug the whole time. He seemed in so much pain. He comes back and tries to take back Barbie Land and make it Ken Land, but when Barbie shows him the least bit of interest, he immediately flies for it. As Ken says later in the film, he never wanted to rule or dominate anyone. He just wanted Barbie to respect him.
I never wanted the throne. I only ever wanted to be your equal.
Now, I understand that this part of the movie is also mocking the ridiculous stereotypes we have about men and women, but here, as we go on, it got a bit mean-spirited to me. Barbie and the other Barbies manipulate the Kens by playing off the male stereotypes they all fill out. They make the Kens fight each other by manipulating them to think that they're cheating. All of this Barbie Margot only feels a moment hesitation on. And it is a neat detail that Margot lowers her voice in the performance right now. The more she starts to lose confidence and become more depressed and become more of a complex person. There's also some great comedy with the Kens. I lost it when I saw a Ken trying to give CPR to his hobby horse on the battlefield. But the way in which the movie continues to cast Ken in the worst light when he's still been treated so much worse than anyone else didn't really sit well with me. Then comes the scene that everyone talks about. The Barbies retake Barbie Land and Ken breaks down, but Barbie Margot goes to him and tries to comfort him, apologizing for how she treated him in the past. She admits that while she doesn't have romantic feelings for Ken, he doesn't need to be defined or validated by her. Men don't need to be defined by women any more than women need to be defined by men. Through this message, people say that the movie is just as pro-men as it is pro-women. But is it? Ken is happy to be just himself, but who is Ken? He's portrayed as completely superfluous in this movie just as the Barbies see him. The movie says that he needs to go and find himself, but we never find out who he really is. It just sort of leaves him there without a satisfying conclusion because it's more concerned with Barbie's story than it is with his. But it gets worse. The Barbies have overtaken the land again from the Kens but admit that there should be changes. One of the Kens suggests that they should be allowed on the Supreme Court, to have equal say, you know. But President Barbie denies them this, saying that maybe they can just have a little cabinet under them. The narrator then declares that perhaps the Kens can have equality in Barbie Land when women have equality in the real world. Wait, what? The movie had a golden opportunity for a great message here. Barbie sees the inequality in the real world, recognizes it in her own world, and the Kens and Barbies create a truce and make an equal society, showing how to deal with unfairness with fairness and setting an example for the real world. But it seems that Greta Gerwig instead wanted to take the opportunity to take a little pot shot. The talkback on all the stereotypes and mean-spiritedness on the Kens is flippant and brief, as the Kens go back to living under the Barbie dictatorship. I guess maybe Barbie is a bit of a fascist after all. It's no wonder that a lot of male critics seem to have a problem with reviewing this film.
Here's the thing, if you do what I do, if you review movies, the dude next to me when the movie got over, he literally looked at me and he goes, "Good luck reviewing that."
But there's a very specific reason as to why they did it. And it's not because the movie's anti-men.
Yeah, it kinda does. But wait a minute, like I said, this movie works on multiple levels. Ever since I saw how this movie portrayed the Ken as some people who's just sort of an accessory with the Barbies, oftentimes just disregarded by them, I couldn't help but think of how I used to play with Kens. Ken is supposed to be iconic for being Barbie's boyfriend, but I used to just stack the Kens up to the side and ignore them while I played with the pretty and fun girl doll I related to. The movie is recognizing the little girl mentality of girls rule and boys drool. It also demonstrates that when you're a little girl, you actually might not be interested in the idea of romance as you're figuring everything out. Of course, I'm not sure how well this plot point plays out. It depends on how you played with the dolls as a kid. I might have disregarded the Kens, while others use him to play wedding with Barbie. Since this part of the movie plays on multiple levels, showing how a child would play, but also commenting on gender dynamics from an adult perspective, I can't say that it really all works, especially when it falls into a bit of man-bashing itself instead of the wholesome answers to the problem. It doesn't even seem to know that it itself demonstrated that when one gender mistreats another, it just becomes a vicious cycle that doesn't help anyone. It would be a lot better to show positive role models for men rather than to primarily show them through a degrading lens. However, as I noted with the Barbie versus Ken dynamic, there is something really great that this movie says of what it is to be a little girl growing up. It's the actual story of the movie. It is something that is shown with subtlety. When you're a kid, everything can seem bright and pink and simple. You might have great fantasies about what it's like to own a house or have a job, but then you start to go through changes that make you uncomfortable. You start to have questions. You start to become exposed to the real world and become messy and complicated, as Weird Barbie puts it. But as Weird Barbie also explains, there's no going back. You have to know the truth. You see that the world is not as simple and bright and good as you might have thought. You start to lose yourself and become jaded. You hate the change. You want everything to be like it was and stay the same forever. But as Gloria says, life is all about change. As we see later from Barbie, she feels that she can't live in the fantasy of Barbie Land anymore after seeing the truth of the world. The only way forward is to live in reality, to grow up and face all the complexities of the world rather than hide away from them or pretend that they don't exist. There's really a brilliance to that storyline. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel that the movie was a bit bleak. Greta Gerwig makes a million observations about the world and its double standards. She voices them through yet another monologue from Gloria. A woman has to try to be so pretty but at the same time hide it so that the rest of the world won't feel inadequate. There's so many contradicting standards thrown out there that it's absolutely impossible to keep up with them. But the movie seems to have a couple double standards of its own. It seems to side with the people who think that attractive, perfect blonde Barbie is a problem, but also side against them for always having a different set of standards where nothing is ever good enough. At one point near the end, it is suggested that maybe there should just be a regular normal doll who is also a mom and doesn't have to be anything more extraordinary. But Barbie Land already represented hefty people and disabled people, as we see in the movie, which no one in the real world seemed to acknowledge. Won't there just be another change that people demand in order for something to be correct in society? It's endless. You can never live up. And the movie acknowledges this, but it also doesn't seem to have any answers against it. But for all the observations and platitudes that the movie makes, it surprisingly doesn't dwell on one very important fact. Barbie dolls, the one that Margot Robbie represents, the pretty pink perfect one, was insanely successful, and it still is. In a recent interview with a Mattel executives, he pointed out that despite all the attempts to correct Barbie and not make it so impossibly perfect looking, that's still the doll people think of when they see a Barbie. And the introduction of curvy dolls actually resulted in a dip in sales initially. And isn't the love for stereotypical Barbie doll what fueled the hype around the movie? Margot didn't go out on red carpets in frumpy clothes so that no one would feel inferior. She went out in the most attractive, show-stopping looks possible, and everyone loved it. What that could mean for the movie's message, Greta doesn't address. But while the Barbie movie primarily sees the character for what she is as a social statement, it doesn't see her so much as what most people see her as, and especially what little girls see her as. A toy. A toy can be anything that your imagination wants it to be. It doesn't have to have any deeper social meaning to it. I wish that the movie had come to a more clear conclusion that there is value in keeping things simple like that, and not being brought down by everyone else's expectations. But actually, it does kind of come to that conclusion. Remember the scene on the bench that I mentioned? Where Barbie Margot tells an old woman she is beautiful? Did you think that was just a throwaway scene? Director Greta Gerwig has said that this scene is the beating heart of the entire film. Once again, Barbie, Margot tells an old woman she is beautiful, someone who has long passed the age of being able to meet anyone's standards of perfection, supposedly. And then the lady confidently says that she knows she's beautiful. She's matured to the point where she isn't concerned with what anyone thinks of her. She doesn't need anyone's validation. She's just confident in herself. And she shows the value of finally growing up and maturing into that confidence, even if it's a difficult pathway to get there. As I said in the beginning of this video, Barbie is a movie with a rainbow of reactions. I think that's because the movie is doing so much at once. There's so many layers to it, and not all of them work, at least not in my opinion. I also don't think people are used to this much complexity in a mainstream film, so that's why they might miss a lot of it. It's a movie with some of the best set and costume design I've ever seen. Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling turn out absolutely stellar performances. Kate McKinnon got some laughs out of me, and Michael Cera's Alan was easily the best part of the film. It's not afraid to be new and weird and do something as crazy as having an 80s dance number in the middle of the third act. It also tells an incredibly wonderful story about growing up and dealing with life. It also does get overbearing and preachy at times. It can feel a little lost in all of its observations and themes, and there is a lot of hypocrisy in the way that it treats men, which is really unfortunate. It's like the movie was just on the cusp of being really brilliant and sticking the landing, but there were just some things that held it back. I wouldn't dismiss any of the criticisms made against this film, but I also wouldn't dismiss all that it's doing and all that it tries to do. And what I love most about this film is how much it got people talking. Whether you love this film or hate it or feel mixed about it, I haven't seen people talk this much about a film in a long time. It's making them think, and that's part of the power of movies. And it makes me really excited for what the success of this film means for what is to come about the future of cinema. And I have a lot more to say about that, so you better like and subscribe to this channel. And if you like all my videos, as always, support me on Patreon. It costs only $5 to sign up. Thank you, Patreon J. As always, you can check out my own explorations of short filmmaking, the link in the description below, and I will see you guys next time.